mean, I think the terms are difficult because, you know, on paper they work really well, but as soon as you start to try and categorize people according to these sort of written definitions, it falls apart pretty quickly. And maybe that's where the challenge lies, is we're asked all the time, you know, what percentage of your population fits this description. Depends, right? Depends on the day sometimes for people. Depends upon why you're asking that question. I think we're asked to try and break it down into something that's much more objective than is possible to do. I think that we have people here that range incredibly in their diversity, but at the same time share a lot of common characteristics. I think there's a lot of mythology that surrounds homelessness. I personally think that the myth that a great number of homeless people are economic refugees, I think that's a myth, because I have yet, I think, to meet anyone in almost 20 years of working with similar populations who found themselves in this scenario simply because of economic reasons. It's usually compounded by many other things. Economics may be the most visible explanation for why they've lost housing, but the reality is that there's usually a lot of other compounding factors that make it impossible for them to rectify that situation alone, or that create a much larger crisis than purely economics would be creating. I think that when I've been asked before, like I have been asked to try and give a broad definition of what kind of characteristics are shared by the homeless population as a whole. And there's a few. I think that marginalization is one, whether that's physical, social, emotional, psychological, economic, that most people here have been systematically and progressively marginalized. Most of them beginning in childhood, I would say. I think for some that onset was adulthood, often when mental illness was involved, because onset of a lot of serious Axis 1 mental health diagnoses is that critical point, late adolescence, early 20s. But for the most part, I would say that everyone in this building has been experiencing some kind of marginalization from childhood on, and it's just gotten progressively worse as they aged. I think that the vast majority of people here share very low self-esteem and low self-confidence. They are not individuals who feel confident in their right to anything. They don't feel confident in asking for anything. They don't feel that they're entitled to anything. They don't, in many cases, feel that they have a place in this world. And so they seek that out in other forms. They seek out a sense of membership in other forms, whether that's at the extreme organized end through gangs, which is the very small percentage, or they find it in communities, lifestyle communities, the use of drugs, the use of alcohol. Street life in general promotes sort of a sense of belonging. I think you see too, generally speaking, across the population, a history of abuse, both physical and emotional, and in many cases sexual as well. And I think for the vast majority of those, that began in childhood as well, and it manifests itself in how they live as adults. So I think they share that as well. Those would be like sort of general common characteristics. Poverty too. I mean, while I don't think economics is necessarily the explanation, the vast majority of people in homeless shelters don't come from wealthy backgrounds. There's always anomalies, but I think they're few and far between. And so a history of poverty is a common trait. Beyond that, they're all absolutely different from each other, right? I mean, they're all individual people, and you can't say that because someone shares a history of abuse that they are any more alike than someone who doesn't have a history of abuse is going to be similar to someone who is not them. So yeah, I think they're all unique, how they manifest that, how they operationalize things in their lives, how they respond to attempts to offer help or assistance, how they make decisions, what they want, who they choose to be in association with. It just varies markedly. And yeah, so I think it's difficult. I think they are all different, and you can only use those kind of characterizations on the most broad level to try and get a sense. of how you might approach a situation. It doesn't give you any more clue to what the answer to any individual's needs is going to be than it would anywhere else.